evening. I wanted to get things started. You have a few minutes because I'm just going to introduce some wonderful people that help put all of this programming together for us, and then I'll pass the mic over to people that you really want to listen to. So my name is Deborah Lamb. I'm the chairman of the Watch Hill Conservancy, and welcome to Lanphear Live. This is our 5th season, and I couldn't be more excited to have you here tonight. Especially thank you for coming out in the rain. I think it's kept a bunch of our friends back tonight. I want to take a minute to thank Janice Sassy, who is our program developer for Lanphear Live. It is her great vision and fabulous invitations that get these amazing speakers here. So please put your hands together and thank Janice. I also want to thank the rest of the Conservancy team. We have Jocelyn Leahy, who's our executive director, and Lori, who is our administrative assistant, and they're here tonight manning hospitality. We have, of course, Grant Simmons, who wears so many hats for us. You know, he's an extraordinary volunteer on Napattree, has been for many, many years. He runs our water quality sampling program there. Grant, how many years have you been doing that?
I want to say 15, 16, something like that.
So, you know, he's obviously just kind of a fly-by-night guy and hardly doing anything, but he's such a committed volunteer there. But he's been a committed volunteer to Lanphear Live and has been our chef since day one. Tonight he's got these unbelievable glazed sausages that if you haven't tried them, please do. I also want to thank Peter August, who will be our MC tonight. And is on tech support and everything else Lanphear Live. I want to point out Daniel Cole, who's sitting up here in the front row. He's our new Napattree Conservation Area Manager, and he's running a camera for us tonight. So he's also on tech support. And I want to thank Tom Papadilla, who many of you know, who runs the entrance at Napattree Conservation Area, but also for things like tonight, helps us do all the things that need to get done that none of us want to talk about. So thank you, Tom, for doing that. I want to take a minute, too, to thank all of the people up here on this slide. In year 5, we've decided to start a new program, and that is to put together sponsorship for this kind of stuff. Lanphear Live is one of the community programming things we do here in this room, but we also do other talks about the kinds of work we're doing on Napattree, talks about interesting community character aspects that are going on in Westerly, as well as we offer this space for a very low rate to other not-for-profits in the Westerly community and in the Watch Hill community. And none of this is free. It takes a lot to host these events, and it takes a lot to carry and maintain this beautiful historic space, which the Conservancy purchased a little more than 2 years ago. So I want to take a moment to thank the Olympia Tea Room, WH2O, Michelli's Furniture, Gray Sail Brewery, Compass and Randall Realtors, a fabulous anonymous donor that wants to honor the pioneers of the Watch Hill Conservancy, Chap Barnes and Fred Whittemore, the very generous A.M. Roberts Charitable Foundation, Marianne and Brian Thompson, and my husband and me. So thank you to all of our generous sponsors. I'm going to now hand the mic over to Peter August, my friend and colleague. Peter serves as the president of the Watch Hill Conservancy, as well as he is our chief science advisor. So, and he will be your MC host tonight. So Peter, take it away.
Thank you, Deborah. And before I get too far along, I need to put on Lou's PowerPoint so we don't forget that. So give me 2 seconds.
I can't do it. Not capable.
The speakers hate it when I forget to put their PowerPoint up there. So it's a real honor for me to introduce Lou Perrotti this evening. Lou is a conservation hero, and his reputation is nationwide. You'll see what I mean in a minute. The conservation of biodiversity happens in many fronts. The Watch Hill Conservancy works very hard to protect our rare and endangered species out in Napatri, our piping plovers, our least terns, and oyster catchers. Organizations like the Westerly Land Trust, and I'll give a shout out to the South Kingstown Land Trust because their leader just walked in, preserve biodiversity by buying land, setting aside habitat to allow our fauna and flora to thrive in that protected habitat forever. Lou performs conservation miracles in a zoo. Zoos play a critical role in wildlife conservation, and Lou will tell us why and how they do it tonight. Lou Perrotti's scientific expertise is in herpetology. That's snakes, lizards, and turtles. His position at the Roger Williams Park Zoo in Providence is Director of Conservation Programs. As we will learn from Mr. Perrotti, the concept of conservation of biodiversity in zoos is very simple. Like Noah and his ark, you get a pair of animals, you breed them, you raise their offspring, and you release the youngsters in the wild to replenish those failing populations or reestablish new populations where they've gone extinct. This is a lot harder than it sounds. Keeping animals alive and healthy in captivity is no easy job. There is no master manual for all the different species that Lou and his colleagues in the nation's zoos work with. And so every big conservation project starts with some really fundamental husbandry challenges. Creating conditions that are just right for breeding is very tricky, and understanding the parental behavior needs that result in healthy offspring can be complex. Lou is a master at this. David Gregg, the executive director of the Rhode Island Natural History Survey, said it very well. Lou can breed anything. Caterpillars, beetles, monitor lizards, tarantulas, frogs, lungfish. He doesn't sit around and wonder how to do it. He just tries something. He's very practical and hands-on. He doesn't overthink it. He just does it, and he does it successfully. Lou Perrotti has been the go-to herpetologist for the state of Rhode Island since he was in high school. He was on the DEM and local police speed dial list. When somebody's boa constrictor got out, Lou knew what to do. No one else did. Lou began work as an animal keeper at the Roger Williams Park Zoo and has performed almost every task that the zoo has to offer. 2 years ago, he was named the recipient of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service's National Recovery Champion Award. This celebrates contributions and achievements of fish and wildlife partners for meritorious work in advancing the recovery of endangered and threatened species. Lou is the president of the Rhode Island Natural History Survey, a very important partner to us in our stewardship of Napatri. So please join me in giving Lou a very warm welcome to Lanphear Live.
Wow, thanks, Pete. I feel like you already gave this talk for me. No, I want to thank the Watch Hill Conservancy for having me out today. I'm very honored to come down here and kind of talk about what our little zoo here in Rhode Island does for the conservation of wildlife and the wild places that they live in. And I'm very fortunate to be where I am. You know, I always told the zoo, you take a chance on me and I'll give you 150% every day. And you know, I try to do that, and I try to do that to the best of my ability. Like Pete said, herpetology and snakes and the creepy crawly things are kind of my forte. So I like projects that nobody else has done. You know, I love the challenge, and you'll see with our conservation portfolio here, you know, I'm going to talk about how all of our AZA accredited zoological institutions contribute to conservation. We all have our own projects. We have our collaborations. But today I want to talk about what happens right here in our own little state and what the Roger Williams Park Zoo does support. So with that, I'm going to talk about the AZA's species survival plans, SSPs we call them. We have a lot of SSP species in our collection. These are species that are critically endangered or threatened that we hold in our zoological institutions as stewards for their wild counterparts. They're breeding programs that are designed to make sure that we're breeding these animals as genetically responsibly as we can. We're not overproducing them. Every species has a coordinator that coordinates. They have a stud book that we can maintain that goes back to historic days. So all these breeding recommendations are made with the best scientific knowledge that we have on the species and the history of these species. And then some of them, they actually have, like Pete said, active reintroduction efforts that go on with them. Species like red wolf, American burying beetles. We've heard about black-footed ferrets. These are all species that exist today because of these partnerships between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and zoological institutions. So our notable SSP birth recently is this little Tamandua baby, which has contributed to the Tamandua population within North American zoos, and more notably, our red wolf pup that we just had. There's less than 300 of these animals left on the planet. They're probably the most endangered canid on the planet. So this little girl here is going to be very vital to the survival of this species moving forward. So she's a young mom. This was her first litter. So we hope to get many litters out of her. And seeing that this young pup is a female as well, hopefully she will contribute to not only the captive population, but the wild population as well. They are actively reintroducing this species. So we're waiting on recommendation from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and partners as to what's going to happen with this little pup. But we're really happy to have her part of our family. American burying beetles. This is one we've worked with now for 28 years. It was actually the first terrestrial invertebrate SSP for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and I'd like to think I'm responsible for that. You know, I went to the AZA and said, well, you know, all these SSP animals are, you know, megafauna and mammals and birds, and there's no insects. You know, do we not care about the insects? These are the little things that run our ecosystem. So with some hemming and hawing, here we go, our first terrestrial invertebrate SSP that I coordinate throughout the United States. We work with St. Louis Zoo, Cincinnati Zoo, and the Wilds, breeding this species, and I'll talk more about it a little later in the talk, for reintroduction efforts for the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. North American wood turtle, another denizen of our habitats here in New England. I'll talk more about this species, but it's also a species survival plan species that I coordinate throughout the U.S. I maintain the stud book, make all the recommendations on breeding and movement of this species across the U.S. And then we support a lot of in situ conservation efforts that revolve around our SSP species. And in this case, the Matchie's tree kangaroo, which is endemic to Papua New Guinea. It's only found on a small little peninsula in New Guinea. I had the good fortune to be able to travel there a few times. This is me in the blue here, in case you couldn't tell. It's an amazing part of the world. The diversity in peoples, and I mean, it was literally like going back in time 3,000 years to work there. They all speak different languages, different villages. The diversity in the people there was almost as amazing as the diversity in the species there. And, you know, the birds of paradise and the long-beaked echidnas and, of course, the tree kangaroos, which are very, very special to New Guinea. But it's a place that's 75% of its primary forest is still intact. 95% of New Guinea is owned by the indigenous communities, but it's also a very mineral-rich country. It's full of tropical hardwood trees that are in high demand by Asian, European markets, even the American markets. So they're very, very susceptible to their land being taken over by mining operations, logging operations. So we work with the indigenous communities there to study the animals, especially the Comanche's tree kangaroo, and in turn provide them with educational opportunities. We've actually set up schools and villages there where we can send villagers to teacher school to come back and teach in these schools. We're bringing medical doctors up. We're trying to fulfill the needs of the communities there and helping them preserve and protect forests. And you know, we don't go over there and tell them what to do. We go over there to empower them to do it. And we've done just that. We have them tracking animals for us. Now they have set aside what is now 200,000 acres of their village and ancestral lands as the first recognized conservation corridor in Papua New Guinea. It can never be logged, it can never be mined, and it's a model now for other areas of New Guinea, which not only helps us save the Comanche's tree kangaroo, but all the other amazing endemic species that live in those habitats, and while preserving the integrity of the indigenous folks' way of life. We're also supporting there the Port Moresby Nature Park, which is kind of their only zoological and educational institution where they can bring school children there, and they're breeding orphaned animals. And you know, to be honest, it's a pretty brutal place to go. You don't want to go there on vacation, I'll tell you that. It's a dangerous place. But this organization here at Port Moresby Nature Park is amazing. We're working with them, trying to rehabilitate animals and trying to get more animals. There's only 35 Comanche's tree kangaroos in captivity. So we're trying to get some of these orphaned and rescued animals into zoological institutions for breeding programs to hopefully make sure that we keep that species on this earth. Africa, we have a big footprint in Africa. We do have 3 African cows at our zoo, Kate, Ginny, and Alice. We're very proud of. Not only do we provide the best animal welfare, veterinary care, enrichment that we can for these girls, but we wanted to make sure we're doing our part for wild elephants. Wild elephants are in big trouble. The latest number was 96 a day are being killed and shot. And that's for many reasons. And we've been supporting this Tanzanian conservation research program for many, many, many years. It's a husband and wife team. They were WCS biologists out of the Bronx. Now they're working out of Lincoln Park Zoo. But husband and wife team, they live in that little hut out on the savannas there. They've raised 2 little girls in that hut, and not only have dedicated but risked their lives for over 2 decades now to save these animals in the Tarangire Park system in Tanzania. It's probably it's the 2nd largest herd of elephants in Africa outside of Amboseli, and probably because of Charles and Laura's work. And you know, a lot of issues with elephants in Africa is human-elephant conflict issues, and you know, that's when elephants and humans mix. Sometimes it doesn't end well for the humans. Crop raiding is a big issue, you know, and you know, we worry about deer and rabbits eating our garden. When elephants come in and raid your gardens, people get hurt, people die, villages get destroyed. And once an elephant becomes a habitual crop raider, they're shot, they're killed. And then, of course, sorry for the graphics of this, poaching is a real issue. And poaching has gotten fierce. It's not just a villager trying to feed its family anymore. These are terrorist organizations, I mean, bad people who would normally smuggle drugs or human trafficking are fueling this. And they're the ones that are, you know, providing the cover and the weapons, military-grade weapons now, where they can make the slaughter even worse and faster. Because they can make more money with animal parts with basically a slap on the wrist if they're caught, as opposed to if they're caught smuggling drugs or humans. So they find this very profitable. So what Charles and Laura have done is they've collared over 2,000 elephants. And when the elephants are in the Tarangire National Park, they're fairly safe. It's when they leave the park in the migrations is when they get into trouble. That's when they run into these crop raiding incidences, any kind of human-elephant conflict issue, and of course poaching. So what we've done is we support this group, and this is a group of Maasai guys that we've actually bought cell phones, GPS units, and bicycles. And once we follow these elephants with the collars on them and find out where they're getting into trouble, where they're crop raiding, we'll send these guys out and our team out to mitigate with these landowners how to deter elephants from raiding your crops. And you can do that in many ways. Pepper sprays, auditory sounds, and now the most ingenious way, which I love, and another project we've supported, is bees for elephants. And if you give these farmers honeybee hives, just like we have here, apiary hives, elephants love honey, but they don't like to get stung. Once an elephant gets stung on the trunk once, he's not going to go near another beehive again. So just the sight of beehives turn these elephants around, which is amazing. So now you're giving the indigenous communities a source of protein, the honey, pollinators for better crops. It's just a win-win situation. The only problem is now the honey badgers have learned to get into the beehive. So we actually funded a project through our grant program on how to deter honey badgers from eating the hives. And then we support a lot of other elephant organizations, the International Elephant Foundation. We're a founding member of the 96 Elephant Campaign, which is a public awareness campaign to just let people know that we're losing 96 elephants a day. You know, that's one every 15 minutes. That's 30,000 elephants a year. That's not going to be sustainable. And that's through poaching and killing, let alone now drought. Elephants are basically thirst. There's no land. They're eating all their own food. They're starving to death. It's not a pretty place. That's why sometimes it hurts when I hear people say, well, elephants belong in the wild. Well, yeah, they do, but it's not a good place for them right now. And I think we owe it to the elephants, not only to try to ensure that their wild habitats are as intact and safe as possible, but maintaining them in captivity as well, just in case. And then I love this project. This is in Uganda, in the Kibale National Park. And what you're seeing here are photos of villagers basically stealing wood out of the national parks. You know, they don't have the luxury of a stove or of an oven. They still cook their meals on wood stoves. You know, moms need wood, cook for their families, but there's no wood left except in the national parks. So they're poaching the wood out of these parks like ants. It's crazy, and they're denuding forests that are home to chimpanzees, gorillas, some of the highest primate diversity, bird diversity. It's bad. So what this project does, and this was another husband and wife team, and it's called the Kibale Fuelwood Project, and now they're the New Nature Foundation. Great group. We actually got them started with their first grant monies. They actually found a plant native to Africa that's related to beans and peas. It's a legume that grows to burnable, maturable firewood in 6 months. So now we can employ villagers to be nurseries for the plant, and then along with it, we teach them how to build more fuel-efficient stoves out of local materials. So now we can provide villagers with incomes in building stoves, becoming nurseries for the plant. So now they have a sustainable wood source and a much more efficient way to burn that wood. And just in 15 years, we've reduced the amount of wood being taken via surveys out of the park by 75%. And we're seeing this problem all over the world. We funded another project in Mexico where the monarch butterflies overwinter, and the same thing is happening there. They're chopping the wood out, so the insulating properties of that forest are gone in these climatic changes where it gets cold, and you see these winters where the monarchs just freeze to death by the millions. So I love this project. I love the fact that it's technology and it benefits the community and it benefits the forest. And then in Central and South America, we have a big rainforest exhibit that we celebrated opening a few years ago. We wanted to make sure we had a big impact in Central and South America. And when I choose these projects, I kind of look for what the needs are. And at the time, in 2007, the chytrid fungus in amphibians, the amphibian crisis, was a big issue. 2/3 of our world's amphibians are threatened with extinction right now. And that's for a synergy of reasons: habitat loss, habitat fragmentation, now disease. There's a fungus that's attacking frogs, and Panama was getting hit really hard with it. It was sweeping the country. They were losing species. Entire populations were bellying up. So I partnered with the El Valle Amphibian Conservation Center. And again, another husband and wife team, Heidi and Edgardo. He was the only biologist doing anything in Panama with amphibians. I saw this heartfelt talk at a conference of him talking about the amphibians of his country were disappearing and that we needed to do something. So a bunch of zoos all came together to build this wonderful facility in El Valle in Panama. It's equipped with some of the latest amphibian husbandry equipment. We went out and, this is typically what you see. You see population level death. I mean, just every frog is bellied up. And frogs don't drink through their mouths. They take in moisture through their skins. And what the chytrid fungus does is it destroys that drink patch. It makes it, basically, it doesn't function. So these frogs basically desiccate sitting in the water. And you'll see a frog sitting there look completely alive, but it's dead. Scary, scary, scary. So we built this center. They were housing 25 different species, probably 1,500 frogs. And I was pretty impressed. And I went up and said, hey, what are you feeding all these frogs? And I'm a reptile bug guy. And, that many frogs is going to need a lot of bugs. So they said, well, we ship fruit flies and crickets in from the United States. And I cringed. I was like, oh, geez. And they said, yeah, half of them die in customs anyway. And, basically, nutritionally, that's like feeding them Twinkies for breakfast, lunch, and supper. And then they said, well, we go out every night and we got to catch hundreds of bugs to feed these frogs. And I said, oh, that's ridiculous. And never make deals at the bar at a conference. I just said to him, hey, why don't you just breed the local insects? He's like, when can you come down and do that? I said, oh, shit. So I grabbed a colleague of mine, Tom Mason from the Toronto Zoo. We went down. We spent 14 days with the amphibian biologists looking at what it was they were capturing to feed these frogs. And most of it was orthopterans, things like katydids, grasshoppers, things we breed here for fun or breed for for insectariums. So I came back to the zoo. I said, I got one for you. Everybody was, building labs and breeding frogs, but nobody thought about the bugs and the food and how much they were going to need. So I said, this is going to be our niche. Let me go down there, give me the money. I'm going to build the infrastructure to build these insect rearing facilities so they don't have to ship non-native insects into the country. They don't have to spend hours at night collecting insects, because at that rate, we're going to be down there building insect rearing facilities to save the bugs. So I did. The zoo gave me a bunch of money. I got a grant from Disney, and we went down there and we built all the infrastructure to build all the bugs they wanted. And we had every stage from nymphs to adults. We were breeding them out in outdoor cages, indoor cages. We showed them how to breed their own fruit flies, their own crickets in a sustainable way. So now they had this variety of food to feed these frogs, keeping them on a much more natural diet. We saw much better survival in the frogs, better reproductivity in the frogs, and better survival in the tadpoles and the metamorphs. So this went viral. I was asked to do this all over the world. So I was approached by this amazing guy. This is Dr. Felonio. He's the me of the San Antonio Zoo. He contacted me, had heard what I had done in Panama, and said, hey, I'm starting a project in Chile. Would you like to partner? And I said, oh, absolutely. He said, well, we're going to be working with these guys. And I went, whoa. That's the Darwin's frog. Is anybody familiar with this frog? This thing is an amazing species. It's tiny. It's about the size of a poison dart frog, your thumbnail. But they have an interesting reproductive strategy. Female will lay the eggs will hatch into tadpoles, and dad will go down and he'll swallow about 8 or 12 of those tadpoles. and you see here this swollen pouch. All the metamorphosis and development of those tadpoles take place in Dad's vocal pouch. So all that goes on inside Dad's pouch. He doesn't eat, he just lets his kids grow up. And once they've got their legs and they're ready to be little frogs, bloop, he pukes them out. How cool is that? I said, I got to work with this frog. So we did. We went down to Chile, and we used shipping containers in Panama and in Chile as well. We can have these shipping containers retrofitted into labs where we can put racks and tanks, and then we bring misting systems and everything that we need from the United States. So now we have 3 labs set up in Chile at the Austral University. So we're working with the university there, which is great because we have professors, we have students that are rotating through the labs. It's just a great fit and a great partnership. And we're working with 5 of Chile's most endangered species, and these are all endemic only to Chile. The problem with frogs in Chile is not only the chytrid fungus, but the introduction of non-native brown trout into their streams. They don't have large freshwater fish that are native to Chile. So for sport fishing, they threw all these brown trout into these rivers and ponds, which these frogs stand no chance against. So that's a big issue that we need to mitigate. And then, of course, all the primary forest is being cut there. All the tropical hardwoods are being taken, and then they're growing these monocultures of eucalyptus trees for cheap lumber, which eucalyptus poisons the ground. It's a pretty toxic tree. So again, a synergy of things that doom these frogs. Some of these species, as Telemeta bufo, if we don't do anything with this species, it's going to be extinct in 5 years. There's only 1 known population left of that species. So we're excited to get the labs up and running, and sadly COVID hit. We haven't been able to travel down there since 2020, so hopefully we're looking to get back down there and do some more expeditions and get some founder frogs for our labs. But currently we're cranking out these Darwin's frogs, which is really cool. And then this leads to Project Selva. This one is land protection in the Amazon, and I love this one because it has a mix of art and conservation, right? So again, this is with my partner Dante. What we do there is we work with an indigenous community along the Amazon, the Bora, and we've all heard about the plight of Amazonian indigenous folks, displaced from hydroelectric dams, everything from fires, selling out lands to mining, logging, soy farming, cattle ranching, whatever. And if you leave them alone, they're fine, but they need medicine. The Western world is encroached on them. They need money, and a lot of their money relies on tourism, going up and down the Amazon, where they can sell indigenous wares, but it's often not enough because these logging companies and farmers or miners will come in and offer them the riches of the world or hold the medicine that they need hostage for their lands. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So, this is home to some of the coolest biodiversity I've seen, and I've been all over the world. I mean, just amazing species. These are all species that live on the Bora land, many of which we have at our zoo even. So it's nice to see these things in the wild. Giant otters, giant armadillo. If you've never seen a giant armadillo, holy cow, it's like something out of prehistoria. Just amazing, amazing biodiversity there. But one thing the Amazon celebrates is its fish diversity, right? It's got some of the highest diversity of fishes in the world. Some that we recognize as aquarium fishes, everything from giant arapaimas, arowanas, piranha. So what we've done is we flew Gayutaku artists in, and if you don't know what Gayutaku art is, it's the art of printing fish. And it's kind of an old natural history way of how they used to document fish back in the day. They would take the fish, wipe the slime off it, ink it, and then press it on rice paper, and you can get these wonderful prints. And we can print everything from 8-foot arapaima to cichlids, to peacock bass. The piranha are really popular. And then they can eat the fish after. You know, first time I've ever eaten Plecostomus. It was gross, but they can still eat the fish. You know, it's fish they would have eaten anyway. And we could take this art back to our zoos and host these big fancy art shows. I had an art show that our zoo hosted at the Providence Art Club, and we invited a bunch of people, and we made $6,000 for the Bora that night selling this art. And I do have some available in my office if anybody's interested in this art. But it's a great, great project. Benefits the Bora. We have a wonderful relationship with the Bora. And they also carve us out of balsa wood these nice little sloths and toucans that we also take back to our gift shops and that we can sell. And again, all the proceeds to these indigenous wares and the Gaiotaku art go back to the Bora. And then during the pandemic, you know, they had nobody visiting them, no tourism. Things were really bad for them. And even when our zoos were hurting ourselves, we were closed. We made sure we maintained our commitment to the Bora. We sent supplies down for them, PPE. We made sure food was getting into the villages. We made sure medicine was getting into the villages. We have a boat, and sadly, not that the pandemic was bad enough, our boat sank. So Roger Williams Park Zoo, and we needed the boat to get the supplies to the Bora. Here they are with their PPE. They were so proud. And we bought them a new boat. Said, why not? Let's buy the Bora a new boat. And it's vital to our project and getting up into those indigenous communities anyway. So we did end up buying a new boat for the Bora. And then we support a lot of organizations that are mission-based for us. We have Cheetah. You know, I'm a department of one. I can't be everywhere. So we make sure that we're supporting the folks that are in the field doing the good work. We want to make sure we have a conservation tie to every species or biome we represent in our zoo. So we give to Cheetah Conservation Fund, we give to Snow Leopard Trust, of course local organizations like the Rhode Island Natural History Survey, the Environment Council of Rhode Island, and on and on. There's a whole list of them, and they often change. We support the Ocean Project, on and on and on. When things happen where there's a huge call, like last year, Texas had that cold snap, that ice storm, and there were 8,000 stranded sea turtles. And it was like, oh my God, what do you do with 8,000 stranded sea turtles? So there was a cry out to the zoological community. So we made sure, we were actually going to send veterinary staff down, but they didn't need that. But we sent monetary support down to help with the costs of the food, the medicine, and whatever it took to rehabilitate these animals. And from what I understand, 98% of them went back into the wild. So it was a pretty successful rescue. The Vaquita, we definitely helped support the Vaquita. This is the probably most endangered dolphin species in the world. There's less than 25 left. And right now they're trying to see what they can do to rescue the remaining 25 so we don't lose them. And their issue is bycatch from illegal fishing operations. And then we're a big supporter of the Saving Animals from Extinction program, which is new for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, acronym SAFE. I like SAFE. It's a great program. We're very involved in it. I sit on the steering committee for numerous SAFE programs. And what SAFE is and how it differs from SSPs is SSPs are more about breeding and genetics and maintaining genetic viability over a long period of time. But what SAFE does brings more stakeholders to the table. So there's giraffe safes, there's cheetah safes, red wolf safes. You're starting to see more coordinated efforts against, towards certain species or groups of species. And again, and I'll give examples, there's a tree kangaroo safe. And to complement what we do in New Guinea with research and working with the indigenous communities there, is it brings stakeholders together. We have a commerce committee where we actually import coffee grown by the indigenous in New Guinea, market the coffee, We have the One Health program going on where we get doctors involved, and it's just a great collaboration of just about every stakeholder that looks at every aspect of this animal's conservation, and whether it's habitat protection, research on the animal itself, or supporting the indigenous communities where these animals live. I'm very involved in the North American freshwater turtle safe. Turtles are a big issue right now. Our North American turtles are being poached at an alarming rate. We're seeing 5,000 a year being taken at ports of exit. We dealt with 2 confiscations last year. First one was 200 eastern box turtles. And then we had another one, 75 wood turtles. And then just recently we had another one, and it's still an ongoing court case, so I won't mention where, but another 250 eastern box turtles. And these turtles were all slated to go to Asia. They're taking our turtles at an alarming rate. Eastern box turtle will fetch tens of thousands of dollars in an Asian market. So it's very lucrative for these poachers to take these turtles. So this SAFE program has brought together all these stakeholders. TSA is like, we don't ever think about things leaving the country. They're worried about things coming in. So we've got TSA at the table, law enforcement at the table, trying to mitigate poaching. And then, of course, road mortality. But the poaching is a big issue. So, you know, we're seeing massive confiscations. These turtles are usually in very bad shape when we receive them. A lot of them are sick or carrying diseases where they can never be released again. So we at our zoo act as what we call a Q1 holding facility. So we're the first ones to receive these turtles at point of confiscation. So the airport calls us, we get the turtles, we triage them at the zoo, weed out the sick, weed out the ones that are dead, and then we do the disease testing at the zoo to make sure they're not carrying rhinovirus. And fortunately for a lot of these populations, we have a good genetic snapshot of what the wild populations look like. So we can take DNA from the confiscated ones and sometimes pinpoint them back to state of origin where they came from, and sometimes population level, what river they came from. So we're trying to repay, our motto is from confiscation to conservation. Sadly, our first confiscation of box turtles were infested with rhinovirus, which is a virus that's affecting wild turtles as well. Proliferates in a captive environment, but it's a death sentence for these animals. So sadly, every one of those animals had to be euthanized, which was sad. And 90% of these turtles are females. So these poachers are taking them off nesting sites when they're easy to find. So the Turtle Safe is working to help mitigate and curb this poaching crisis. But we got some great partners poised to house these turtles and try to get these turtles placed into either, ideally, back to the wild, or into situations in zoos and SSPs where we can breed them, and hopefully their offspring would have a conservation value. And if they can't breed, then we'll put them in education situations where they can be ambassadors for turtles and let folks be aware of what's going on. And here's some of the little guys we're holding now. But our big focus here is local conservation. And by working locally, it just gives us a good opportunity to form solid working relationships with our state and federal agencies, which we have. And something that fish and wildlife organizations don't have are the facilities and the expertise to rear these animals in captivity for reintroduction efforts or rescue holdings or whatever the need may be. You know, typically, historically, biologists and zoologists used to butt heads, right? The biologists thought zoos just went out in the wild, collected everything, put it in cages and charged money to see it. And we said, well, you biologists just go out in the woods, collect everything, put it in pickle jars, and it ends up in a museum basement or in a university closet. So through programs like red wolves, you know, black-footed ferrets, we started to see the value of the partnerships, and we've come a long way. And it also gives us the opportunity working locally. I can't bring everybody to New Guinea or the Amazon, but I can take folks out into New England cottontail habitat or take them to see American burying beetles on Block Island or Nantucket. So it gives us an opportunity to get our visitors involved, our students, our keepers, the kids that go through our zoo camp programs, right down to teachers. It's great. And it gives our educators the ability to design curriculum that we can teach to kids, our next generation, that I think is about a big part of my job, is inspiring that next generation, that you don't have to go to the Amazonia or Africa to see habitat loss or species in trouble. It happens right here in our own backyards, and we got some pretty unique species at that. And we also gives us the opportunity to work with our partners, and that's everything from all the other zoological institutions around us, from Zoo New England to Beardsley Zoo, Buttonwoods, and then of course all the organizations like TNC, Audubon Society, et cetera, et cetera. And we've been doing that for a long time in a lot of ways with a lot of species, through captive reproduction, reintroduction efforts, habitat restorations. We've written the books on a lot of these species. A lot of these have never been bred before. We were the first. And again, it involves our visitors, our keepers, our staff in involvement in endangered species conservation at a local level with our ability to educate. And this one we've been doing for 28 years. This is an amazing species. This is the American burying beetle. It's a carrion beetle, the largest in the genus Microphorus. It's about 35 millimeters long, about 2.6 grams, pretty big by insect standards. Sexually dimorphic, the male has a rectangle here, female has a little triangle, so they're easy to sex. They're a carrion beetle and a burying beetle, so they need a vertebrate carcass between 80 and 180 grams to be able to bury and prepare for their larva. Oop, what did I do, Pete? Okay. So we've been working with this species since 1994. And first I got to tell you a little bit of life history of this thing. It buries that carcass, and say something the size of a mourning dove. We'll say a mourning dove. So they'll bury that. In 24 hours, the male and female cooperate to bury that carrion. They'll strip all the feathers off of it and roll it into a ball and secrete anal and oral secretion onto that ball, which basically keeps any fungal or bacterial buildup. It basically embalms the carrion. So you could pick up now this 7-day prepared, what was a bird, ball and smell it. And it doesn't smell like a 7-day-old dead bird. It smells like something that belongs on a hardware store shelf. I mean, it's just amazing. Female lays the eggs nearby. Once the eggs hatch, she carries the larva to that brood ball, and they're about as big of a grain of rice when they hatch, and their mandibles aren't strong enough to eat on their own. So they stroke the mandibles of the adults to solicit feedings. So the adults actually feed the larva, which is amazing. Unheard of in the insect world outside of social insects like ants and termites. So we've been breeding this guy for a very long time. Doesn't take a lot to breed it. It's actually a great project for small zoos with small budgets. We've put over 3,000 beetles on Nantucket Island, where there hadn't been one seen since 1926. And we continue to monitor the population now. So as we know, and here's kind of the process. Here's a pair, in this case it was a rat. They're burying the rat. Here's a carcass with the first instar larva on them, and the female actually chews this little cavity in the top of that brood ball to keep them all together so it's easier to feed them. And then they change instar every 2 days, so they go from grain of rice to good and plenty candy size to little Michelin men about the size of your little finger. At that point, the carrion's been pretty much eaten, and the larva, that triggers the larva to burrow into the soil, and it takes 45 days to pupate into an adult beetle. 21 days they're mature, and they do it all over again. They only live a year. The adults die after the breeding process, so they need to recruit every year. They used to range 35 states from the Canadian provinces all the way down to Florida, just east of the Rocky Mountains. Now, they They've disappeared from 90% of their range. The only place you can find them now is in 6 populations out in the Midwest and in Block Island here in the east. That's it. They hung on Block Island. Amazing. We're still trying to figure that one out. So we take our breeding stock from Block Island. Every year I go out there and I take 10 pairs and I turn those 10 pairs into 700 pairs, and we take them out to Nantucket Island. And we chose Nantucket Island because it's very similar to Block Island in habitat type and the fact that there's no scavengers, mammalian scavengers to compete for carrion. Because we think the reason this beetle disappeared in the first place was, of course, habitat loss and alteration, which causes species composition change, right? So you push your predators out, you get more scavengers that become prevalent, and then you lose species. And then you can almost map the decline of this beetle with the decline of the passenger pigeon, gone. Heath hens, which used to be all over the islands. It was a ground nesting bird here that had high mortality events in chicks. Carolina parakeets. So now you have less resource of suitable size, more competition for that resource, less habitat, and then you throw in modern day stressors like pesticide use, nighttime lighting, the beetle loses. And that's where we feel we lost it. But we've been introducing on Nantucket, and it's beautiful because we don't need helicopters and Land Rovers, just a cooler, a shovel, and some deli cups. And we can reintroduce 1,000 endangered species back into the wild. It is a federally protected insect. It was listed in 1989 by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And we don't just say fly, be free. Again, it is an SSP, so we do stud book these beetles, believe it or not. We know the lineage of every single beetle. So we predetermine the pair that's going to breed, and then we provide them a carrion resource, in this case, a quail. So we kind of dig a hole, we pull a turf plug up, we dig a little side chamber, we stick the quail in, we stick the pair of beetles in, we put the turf plug back, and then we screen it to keep the gulls and crows out of it. And then we go back in 11 days to dig it up. We dig up 30% of them to look for larvae. And then to monitor the population for abundance and a distribution across the island, we use pitfall traps, which are, again, not high-tech stuff. They're a wide-mouth mason jar buried up to the lip that we put a little urine cup that we turn into a bait cup. We bait it with rotted chicken, which is, there's a recipe for rotting that chicken. If it doesn't make one field tech projectile vomit, it's not right. This year I had to carry it on the ferry with me. I got any seat on the boat I wanted. But we trap for them. Every beetle that we catch is marked and numbered, so we know every individual on the island, where it's moved, where it's gone, if it's switched broods, etc. So it's been a great project and a partnership of so many folks from Nantucket Conservation Foundation, Mariah Mitchell, Mass Audubon, Mass Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, the Land Bank, and the zoo. And then in 2016, we had kids from the St. Michael's Country Day School in Newport was doing a project on state insects and realized that Rhode Island was only one of 6 states that didn't have an official state insect. So these little 3rd grade kids put together a PowerPoint, and I was just their consulting scientist. I didn't have to do anything. They testified in front of the House, they testified in front of the Senate, gave a little PowerPoint on the importance of this beetle, how significant it is to our state. It's truly a Rhode Island endangered species. And here's Governor Raimondo signing the bill, making the American burying beetle now the Rhode Island state insect. And, bunch of 3rd grade kids. Yeah. Yeah, that made me feel good. And then, of course, Dr. Goodall heard about the project. She loved it. She said the beetle takes care of its kids better than most humans. She wanted to write about it, and she did. She wrote a whole chapter in this book, Hope for Animals in Their World, bringing endangered species back from the brink. So that was probably a big honor to have Jane Goodall actually write a chapter in a book about me and the beetle project. And we've remained great friends since. She writes me handwritten letters all the time. always ask me how the beetle's doing. So very, very cool. Happy 88th birthday, Jane. And then this one I really love. This one, the timber rattlesnake. We only have 2 native venomous snakes in New England, neither of which we have in Rhode Island any longer. The timber is seriously threatened in all of New England. I'll show you a range map. We extirpated ours in the 1960s because of a bounty system. There was a bounty on the snake. I think it was 5 cents per tail if you brought them in. They ended up eradicating them in Rhode Island and Maine in the 1960s. Habitat loss is huge for these guys. They're very dependent on den sites. They overwinter in these sites. They breed at these sites. And here's a picture of 3 gravid females, pregnant females. That the females that are pregnant of the year will stay at the dens at what they call rookeries and just kind of cook their babies all season and give birth at those dens so those babies can imprint on those dens as well. Takes them 7 to 8 years to become sexually mature. They only breed every 3 years, so they're not a very fecund snake. 8 to 12 is average litter size. They do give birth to live young. They are ovoviviparous. But for a poacher, that's a jackpot. You're getting 3 adult females all carrying babies. So not only is habitat loss a big issue for these guys, of course, Rhode mortality, which is bad for all reptiles, turtles, amphibians. We still have poaching going on. North American rattlesnakes are in high demand in the European and Asian markets because they are truly an American snake. And now we have a disease issue. We talked about the chytrid fungus in amphibians. We heard about white nose syndrome in bats. Now we have this, what they're calling Ophidiomyces ophidiocola, is the snake fungal disease. And if you look at the historic range of the snake in New England and its current range, which is pretty scary. And some of these sites only have 6 animals left. Some without any even reproductive adult females in them at this point. So this snake is going to blink out of New England if we don't do something about it. So our main thing with the zoo is when I got started with the timber, we wanted to look at the disease, right? What's going on with this disease and how prevalent is this disease? So our vets and our veterinary department is very vital to a lot of my projects. They wanted to look at this, so we wanted to look at it in every single den site. And this is what we're seeing. This is what the disease does to them. It completely disfigures their faces where they have no ability to sense. A lot of times they can't eat, and it can be a death sentence and fatal for the animals. So we designed a study where we had biologists bringing us snakes in from every population, fast and furious. It was crazy. I must have wrestled and handled 500 rattlesnakes over the 2-year period where they would biopsy the lesions so we can get an idea of what the prevalence of disease was throughout New England. And sadly, we found that it was in just about every den site. It's pretty spread. We didn't see anything that determined whether it was spread by poachers with dirty snake bags or any of that. Treatment was often successful in the real bad ones. We had very little mortality. I don't think it's the death sentence for the animal yet, but it's something I think we need to keep our eye on. So what we're doing now is we're actually head starting animals. We're captive breeding and taking in gravid female animals, letting them give birth at the zoo. And then we can raise those neonate snakes up to about 300-400 grams, get them past predation size, and then we can reintroduce them at the den sites. We implant them with radios so we can track their progress over 2 years to make sure that they are imprinting on the sites and nothing's going wrong. They're not moving. They're not doing anything that they shouldn't be doing. And we've done this very successfully for the first time with the timber rattlesnake. And then we had a great plan to reintroduce them on an island in the Quabbin Reservoir in central Mass, which was within historic range of the animal. And man, the public got wind of that one. And it didn't go over very well. This is what we got. And we had to, it went to the government, it went to the governor. we had to host town hall meetings. We came up with statistics on, the last person bitten by a timber rattlesnake in Massachusetts was in the 1800s, and he probably died from the cure, not the bite, because they used to treat it with chicken livers and cut arms off, and it was crazy. More people die from vending machine accidents than snake bite in New England. We're putting children's and pets in danger. The venom's going to poison the water supply when they swim. I love that one. Terrorist plot tied to 911 was another big one. If we're seeding the reservoir with venomous snakes, it would impede law enforcement's ability to protect the reservoir. Crazy. Waste of taxpayers' money. It's going to ruin mass tourism. Nuts. Nantucket's the most dangerous place on Massachusetts because of tick disease. But, and on and on and on. I had one guy actually ask me, did you give any thought to what's going to keep them on the island when the reservoir freezes in the winter? You think it's going to slither across the ice, right? I even got personally attacked. This was in the Providence Journal. Is Lou Perrotti out of his mind? Please stop creating dangerous snakes to be released in New England. New England is surviving just fine without nasty, dangerous rattlesnakes. It's insane. Why do we need to infest New England with danger? Please stop the madness. Okay? This was a slap in the face to the conservation of non-charismatic species, right? We can't just save species based on fear and speculation because we're going to have habitats full of bunny rabbits and butterflies, and they're not going to be very functioning ecosystems. So shame on Massachusetts. They should have stepped up, put their foot down, and they didn't. We may have lost this battle, but because the project got put on hold. We're very restricted on what we can do with the species right now. We're still operating in undisclosed areas, but we're allowed to do that. But we owe it to that snake. It's a Massachusetts endangered species, no different than the loon, the bald eagle, and it deserves every bit of protection any of those other species deserve. So this is a fight I'm going to continue to fight, despite Mrs. Forrest's comments there. I'd love to meet her someday and have a cocktail with her, but we're still fighting that fight. It just shows the need for conservation education, right? I mean, we have to teach folks that these animals are important, and that's where we need to start with our young kids, our younger generations. That's where we're going to get to it. So we make sure we include as much snake education as we can. We've built exhibits at the zoo featuring timber rattlesnakes and copperheads. We worked with Jeff Corwin doing TV shows about the importance of timber rattlesnakes, conservation efforts, because kids aren't naturally afraid of snakes. They're taught to fear snakes. And my kid, this was my son when he was a little guy, he's always grabbed snakes, been bitten a million times. It's just part of it. Anything with a mouth can bite, right? This one's a little easier to sell to the public, but a big one and an important one for us. This is the New England cottontail. It's our only native rabbit, or cottontail species of rabbit. It's kind of the spotted owl of the East right now. A lot of money is into saving this species. It's state endangered in just about all the New England states. It ranges from Maine south into Connecticut, no further east than eastern Connecticut, west than eastern Connecticut. So it's truly a New England species. It's also a species that's very reliant on early successional habitat, which is a very rare habitat type now. So a lot of habitat restoration is part of this species conservation efforts. And it has been, with the lack of cottontail rabbits in the landscape 75 years or so ago, hunters, with seeing no rabbits to shoot, moved the eastern cottontail from the Midwest into New England, which is a much more hardier rabbit. It can live anywhere. It doesn't care if it's early successional fields. They'll hop around on the patio out here. We see them in the inner city. Everybody's been seeing an explosion of eastern cottontails. They're everywhere, but they outcompete these guys. And where the easterns are, the New Englands will not go. So it's a big issue, and we've lost this rabbit in most of its range. And it was, up until a couple of years ago, a candidate for federal listing. It almost became listed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife as endangered. But proud to say, because of all the on-the-ground conservation efforts going on for the species throughout its range with all of our partners, it was left off the endangered species list. So of course, our role in this, I was approached by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, asked if we wanted to breed the rabbit. Of course, nobody else had bred it before. I was like, oh my God, well, breeding wild rabbits might be tricky. You know, how are they going to do? We didn't know if we were going to have to build elaborate pens, if we could keep them in lab cages. So in the beginning, we started very small. We just took 6 animals in, 3 males, 3 females, just to see if we could keep them healthy, happy, see them eating. And our only measurement was weight, making sure they weren't losing weight, looking at fecal output, making sure they didn't have diarrhea. Of course, our vets kept a good eye on them. And we found that they all did well. They took to the pellet diets. They drank out of water bottles. We could keep them in lab cages. So we started reintroducing them, and boom, we started producing little baby cottontails. These are actually some photos of the first captive-born New England cottontails, which is really, really neat. And a lot of people ask how you tell the difference. And the only real way to know is genetically. When we take founders in, we send fecals down to URI, where we have a whole lab set up and dedicated just to New England cottontail genetics. So once I get the founders, fecals go to URI. Once they're confirmed, then we assign them a number. We air tag them, chip them, the vets get them, kind of give them the spa treatment. Babies. So yeah, the vets get them, weigh them, we x-ray them, we air tag them, microchip them. We take any kind of samples. We take ear tissue, we take parasites for anybody that wants to do any research on the species. And then they go into the breeding program. The keepers get them. And then we typically microchip them like you would your dogs and air tag them as well. So we have met all the captive breeding goals in a very short period of time. I mean, we've been doing this since 2011, and we've established a healthy population on Patience Island. We're reintroducing at Ninigret National Wildlife Refuge and in Great Swamp. And then we also send our babies up to New Hampshire and Maine for release as well. So we've established populations in Maine, New Hampshire, and here in Rhode Island in a very, very short time through captive breeding and great partnership. So we've released 334 rabbits since we started this project. And no, they don't breed like rabbits. You know, you'd think they'd be easy. They're really not easy. They're tough. We see a high mortality in young kits. Usually 1 to 3 days is where we lose them. So we get about a 50% mortality rate in kits, which we're trying to work on improving that. This year we worked with URI doing mate choice studies. We're trying everything we can, giving different nest materials. So the more we know, the less we know. So we're actually writing a husbandry manual, propagation and reintroduction manual on this species. And we've actually consulted other cottontail rabbit projects across the United States. So it's been a great project. And again, I may be a department of me, but it takes a village. All these projects do. And you know, I can't thank all our partners, everybody from Maine to Rhode Island DEM, Mass Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, URI, Audubon, UNH, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and it goes on and on and on. And then with talking about the turtle crisis, besides what we're doing with the SAFE program and confiscated animals, we've been working with DEM, Rhode Island Natural History Survey, URI, looking at populations of our species of special concern right here in Rhode Island. I've been monitoring wood turtles for 7 years in Rhode Island, have located healthy populations, key nesting sites, which is going to help in the conservation of these animals. And then this year we had a new partner join the team, Newt, our turtle sniffing dog. He was amazing. This guy was trained to sniff out wood turtles, and in the process he learned how to find box turtles for us. It was just amazing. And the beauty of the dog is he could find the age classes that we can't, right? The little hatchlings, like try to find a box turtle hatchling in the wild. You just can't do it. I mean, they're impossible to find. But it's also a key piece of us understanding population dynamics. You need to know how many babies, you need to know how many subadults, etc. And Newt Newt can find those for us. So he's viral now. I think he has his own Instagram account. He's got over 2 billion hits or something like that. But he was fun to work with. And you're seeing the use of dogs in more and more conservation initiatives. From everything from turtle finding dogs, scat detection dogs, right down to spadefoot toads. So.
Why does he have the glasses?
So his eyes don't get scratched going through the brush. A lot of these turtles hide in the briar patches. It'd be cool if he had a snorkel and he went in the water. And he too has a GPS collar on him, and he even has a tick suit that looks like a Tyvek suit that he wears. He was hilarious. And then we work a lot with our eastern spadefoot toads here. It's our only state endangered amphibian. We only have 10 species of frogs and toads in the state. This one is endangered. There's only 2 known naturally occurring populations that we know of. So we've been working with numerous partners. Again, URI, Rhode Island Natural History Survey. It's all the same group of wonderful folks. Westerly Land Trust, South Kingston Land Trust. And we're actually building breeding pools for the species. And they just can't breed in any vernal pool or a pond. They need something that has a very quick hydro period, something that fills up, because they only breed if you get a rainstorm that's like 5 inches or more. So they're very specific to breeding. So you could have years of no rain where you see years of no breeding of this species. So they have these pools that fill up quick in these rainstorms. They have these explosive breeding events. And then as that water is evaporating, that toad can speed up development, morph out quick, and get out of those pools. And then because they dry up so fast, nothing else can establish in there, like dragonfly larvae or things that could be potential tadpole predators. So we've been building a series of these pools throughout the state. And then we had, in 2019, in a late July tropical storm, we got the perfect conditions, and we actually found a new population that we didn't know about in a retention ditch. Somebody said, I think they're spadefoot toads, and we went down there and we rescued about 1,000 tadpoles out of there, which it would have dried up overnight if we didn't get them out. I raised these guys, all 1,000 of them. I think I might have lost 10 out of 1,000 toads, which is great. Feeding all those toads is pretty crazy, thanks to all my skill in Panama. But we took those toads, and then we had another breeding event last year. Same thing, we took another 1,000 toads, raised them, and then we split them amongst the sites. We put a third back where they came from, and then we seeded our new pools that we built for the species. So 2019, they mature 3 to 4 years, so within another year, hopefully we'll see the fruits of our labor and see spadefoot toads breeding in our pools. So very exciting. We actually now formed what's called the Eastern Spadefoot New England Working Group, where we're working with partners across the range here in New England, guys from Massachusetts, which is great. So we all bring our heads together about rearing and habitat restoration and pool building, and just been a great project, and again, keeping one of Rhode Island's most endangered species on the landscape. And then citizen science is becoming big. We have a lot of citizen science things, everything from the Sunflower Project to, started with the Audubon's Christmas bird counts. But we have a program that the AZA runs called Frog Watch, where we train citizen scientists how to recognize the calls of our 10 species of frogs and toads. Then they collect a little bit of data for us, and they go out and listen, rate the calls on an intensity scale. And we've gotten a database we started this project in 2007. I've trained over 1,000 people who are now monitoring over 80 sites across the state, all 5 counties of the state. So now we have a snapshot from April to August of what the breeding populations of our frogs and toads look like. We can search it by temperature, we can search it by rainfall, we can search it by time of night. A biologist could never collect this much data in his lifetime that we did with a bunch of kids and their moms and dads and senior centers and you name it. And it's great. We have a big celebration at the end of the year. We present awards to the people with the most observations or the coolest find. And again, it gives us a good idea of the breeding dynamics of our frogs here and toads in the state. It could help us detect chytrid or any disease or die-off or invasive species that might be affecting our populations or that we didn't know existed. So great program. This is something you all can do. We host our trainings every February and get everybody ready for the big night in April. And again, I can't stress enough all of our local partners. Not only are they all wonderful colleagues, but many have become very good friends, a lot of our biologists. One thing we're very lucky about, not only in Rhode Island, but New England, is we have a lot of dedicated and passionate people that want to make sure that these beautiful places that we live in remain beautiful for the next generations. And you know, part of my job is making sure that I leave this planet at least as good, hopefully a little better, but at least as good as it was left to me. And you know, all these guys, we all work together to do that, not only inspire the next generation. I mean, kids that I've gave talks to in high school are now writing my permits, you know, which is really cool to see this progression of all these kids that are becoming now our biologists, our state biologists, our land stewards. It's just wonderful, and the list goes on, and I might have forgot a few here, but I just want to stress that. Research, we're not a research institution, but we do allow kids to, or students, grad students, to use our collection when need be, as long as they present us with a proposal, and it's going to benefit any areas of husbandry, behavior, conservation, reproduction, not only in captive animals, but wild animals. And then we do have a small grants program that we touch a lot of species all over the world. And of course, we have a green team at the zoo to make sure that we're doing our part, recycling, zero waste events, no plastic bags, looking at our composting. We always look at improving our green, our footprint every day. And with that, that's what I do all day. Thank you.